Did you manage to survive the Shadowverse Open kickoff tournament? What was supposed to be the inaugural Worlds Beyond tournament for the Western regions ended up in an unmitigated disaster, with hours of delays, miscommunication, and lost sleep for all parties involved. In fact, it was so bad that the tournament was delayed by over 3 hours, and by the time round 1 finally began, the admins announced that the second tournament of the day would be cancelled and rescheduled. In today's video, first we're going to cover the results of this 1024 player tournament and the top performing deck lists, and then we're going to talk about the drama around this catastrophe of the tournament and what led to it. So we're currently on the website www.shadowversemaster.com, where you can always check out the latest deck lists from both tournament and ladder. And in addition, in today's video, we're going to be covering at least one deck list from each of the top performing archetypes. So for those that don't know, in today's tournament, it was a Swiss format, so 10 rounds, and everyone who went 8-2 or better qualified to the next stage. And also it was a 2-deck 0-ban format. So the way this worked was it was actually a BO1, and so both players looked at each other's deck lists, and you picked one of the 2 deck lists to play, and your opponent doesn't know what you picked until the game begins. So I think a lot of people didn't really like this format, and it was supposed to make the tournament a lot smoother to play, but that didn't really work out, did it? But anyway, let's go into the deck list. So first deck we're going to look at is Aggro Abyss. So this is the best aggro deck in the format right now. So effectively, it runs a bunch of 1-drops. It runs a really overstated 2-drop, which is a 3/3. So you take 3 damage, but it's usually going to land 3 damage to the enemy. And then in addition, he's running some spicy tech like Dark Side. So we don't see this too often, but you can either use this as removal, but in certain situations, you can buff your own followers and do 2 extra damage, and people won't see that coming. It's a little bit worse than obviously Rage of 7, so it just does 3 damage. But hey, sometimes you can do some crazy stuff, like you evolve the bat, you give it a drain, and then you give it a +2 attack, and then you just heal up. I don't think it's relevant in too many situations, but I mean, he runs 1 copy as tech. I don't hate it. And then apart from that, it looks like a pretty standard list. 2 Odin and 2 Olivia. I do question why he's not running 3 Odin. It feels like the best finisher of the deck, but maybe he just didn't own enough legendaries for it. Seems believable to me, at least. But even then, I mean, I think in the tournament format, you could literally play any deck, even if you don't own it. So maybe he just doesn't think that Odin is important enough. Okay, moving on. He's the only player to top with Dirt Rune. So as you can see, he's not running Declimb for one. Like, this list is quite interesting, right? It doesn't seem to run Kuon, and it doesn't run Declimb. I will say that this list is extremely good against aggressive decks. So I think it has like it's good against all types of aggressive decks, but it does struggle against decks like Roach, for instance. But I think that basically with his Aggro Abyss in his lineup, he already has the Roach matchup kind of covered already. So I think this one is just to have a wider matchup spread. And in addition, most people don't really have much practice against Dirt Rune. So I can see this getting like kind of the surprise factor as well. So I haven't seen this deck too much on ladder myself, but of course it has very strong tempo. So for example, Edelweiss, you can evolve down turn 4, even if you're going first. And then it also has just randomly strong cards, right? Like, so for instance, this one, you select an enemy following the field and deal 3 damage. You don't even need to Evo, you control the board, you can continue going face, so that's very strong. And when you evolve, you can do it again. So it's got some strong cards for sure. And of course, running 3 Anangreya, 3 Burgeon Rejected Arts, so you get permanent value even if you don't run that much spell boost in the deck. 3 copies of Norman, obviously this card's insane at the moment. It's so good that it's even being run as spell boost. And then we have 2 copies of William Mysterious Student, so you do run a few spells in the deck, especially with Burgeon, getting these spell boost every turn. And then your finisher is just going to be Lilanthem, so this card, very hard to clear this if you're not playing puppets pretty much, and then they'll basically get 5 to 7 damage on you the next turn. And of course 2 Odin, I mean Odin is very splashable, and does 7 damage with Super Evo, so what's not to like? So yeah, very interesting. I think it's cool that he brought an off-meta deck, and that's why we covered him first. Okay, next up we have Spell Boost. So Dreamlife is a teammate of mine, so we've known each other for a very long time. So of course I'm biased and I want to cover his deck. So also to my recollection, he did mention that he mostly just played Spell Boost today. Like the Aggro Abyss was really just to make sure that his lineup wasn't too vulnerable to the decks that Spell Boost is weak against. But he was obviously going to play Spell Boost most of the day, and he did very well with it. So it's a pretty standard list, I would say. So you would have seen this particular variant around on the ladder recently. So basically, it runs all of the standard kind of Earthright package that we're seeing now that they want to fit in 3 copies of Norman. And in addition, they're running all the standard really strong spell boost rune cards. So Stormy Blast, Homework Time. You know, this card is meant to be an Earthright card, but it's somehow found its way into every spell boost deck. So I think ultimately This list is a little bit slower than what you might have been used to in the previous expansion. It's sort of become more of a sustained deck that focuses on clearing the board really like, every single turn after a certain point. For example, the Adam Gray version will clear everything, and then you can start using Norman, you can use William. Turn 7, you Super Eva Kuon potentially, and on turn 10, you either look for the finisher with Rule of Cocytus, or you look for the finisher with Kuon, right? And you have Declimb to enable that. One thing people obviously noticed is that you don't actually need to discount Dimension Climb to 0. It's perfectly fine even if the cost is like 4 to 7 or something like that sometimes. All you need is just to draw a new hand and then basically play your boss monster on that turn. So yeah, overall, Spellboost Rune is still one of the strongest decks of the format. This Norman card is unacceptably strong, but it is what it is. And we won't cover the Aggro Abyss deck, given that he didn't really play this much today anyway. Okay, so next deck is Midrange Abyss. So this one has been a ladder terror. So I'm not surprised to see it in the Shadowverse Open as well. So effectively, this deck, it does ride off this card called Karen, Stygian Oarswoman. So essentially, this card on Fanfare, you reanimate to a card that's 2 cost or less, or card with 1 cost or less, and then they both gain Ward. And when you Super Evo, you gain a Crest, which reanimates 3 at the start of your turn. So this represents a crazy amount of value, and it makes your opponent forced to clear your board every turn. If they don't, they take chip damage. And if they do take any amount of chip damage whatsoever, it opens them up to getting poked down with Odin, or alternatively with cards like Cerberus. So when you Super Evo this, it does like 8 to 9 damage. If there's fall on the field, they also gain 2 more attack to hit the face. So they can also combo this with, of course, Shadow Crypt Memorial. So this deck is extremely strong. Basically, the main concept is control the board, and then you start Super Evoing your really sticky cards, and eventually finish on a Sub or Ginsetsu to outlast them. It's got a lot of different win conditions, but it's also a wallet deck. So, I mean, how many legendaries is this? Like 3, 6, 9, 11, 13, 16, 19. 19 legendaries. It's almost half the deck. Which is kind of crazy, and it's outside most people's ability to play. And then mid-range swords, I think this is the first one we're covering today. So it does lean towards a bit more of an aggressive focus. So it's running 3 copies of Quickblader, and he's also running the Prim package, 2 copies of this, 2 copies of Seria. So this card in the current meta is very strong against decks like Abyss, for instance, and even against Roach, because you can shut down their fairies. And then basically, mid-range sword is brought mostly to curb against other aggressive decks. So as long as you don't brick on mid-range, you're very favored against decks like Aggro Abyss. But it just has a very good matchup spread in general, so that's why mid-range sword is very popular today. And of course, once you drop them enough, Albert is lethal with Super Evo for 12 damage. So this deck does run a lot of the new cards in the set. Obviously, Guild Aria is very strong as well. But effectively, after a certain point in the game, you're going to be able to clear a majority of your opponent's boards, and then you want to threaten lethal with either Albert, or in this case, it's even running 1 copy of Centaur Centurion. So next up, we have S5 Hotaru. So he's also a member of my team. So I'm very happy for him that he managed to qualify. And he has been carrying our guild as well. So he's constantly at the top of our guild, grinding points, GRP. So it's good to see that his effort has finally started paying off. I know that he plays a huge amount of Forest, so big congrats. Essentially, he's running a very standard list, I would say. So, of course, he runs 3 copies of a new card, so Ambush from Above. This is just generically strong. It's conditionless almost to get the 2 damage. And then, of course, does 4 damage split across followers. So, a very versatile card. Almost every Forest list is running this. In addition, he is running 3 copies of Water Fairy. So, this is not as commonly seen in the current meta. To some extent, I wonder why. I mean, it is actually quite a strong card. It's a 1-drop. You can contest against aggressive decks like Aggro Abyss, and it's the best 1-drop in the game. If you drop it in Forest, you have a pretty large advantage. Of course, it is weaker in the mid and late game, so there is a trade-off, obviously, to playing this. But yeah, I mean, it's good to see that it's still on the 3 Good Fairy of the Pond. In addition, he is running 3 copies of Garden's Lore, so I know some of the Japanese lists recently have cut this down to 1 copy. But considering his list and the fact that he probably does want to fuse away cards like the Water Fairy in the mid-late game, it does make sense. It also makes the deck more consistent, the hand management is unparalleled, and it helps dig you into your pieces by drawing 2 cards. So not surprisingly, he runs 3 copies of this. And then apart from that, he is running a very standard package, no new cards aside from that. So he still runs the 1 Olivia as his Super Evo of choice. And apart from that, obviously 3 Babel Carbuncle to OTK the opponent. So Yeah, very standard Roach list. I guess the only thing that's a bit strange is maybe the Good Fairy of the Pond, but I do like it. Have we covered Midsword yet? If we haven't, he's running quite a spicy list as well. So he's running Band of the Battle Princesses. So we don't see this too frequently in Sword, but essentially it does 4 damage to a random enemy follower, including stealth followers, which is good. And on Enhanced 4, it does 12 damage to the board, which is kind of insane. In addition, it's running 3 copies of Prim, so it makes sense. I mean, if we look at this list, he's also running 3 copies of Rose, the new card as well. So this one, an Enhanced 5 against empty board is pretty good. You can save up the Enhanced follow for later. And then also, 2 copies of Luminous Magus. Some people are cutting this down, but I think he still likes it for the fact that it's great against aggressive matchups in particular, and it's obviously very strong with Amelia Super Evo with Luminous Mage. And then he's running 3 copies of Odin. Odin is kind of insane still, in Midsword in particular. And then we have 2 Olivia, 1 Urias probably as a counter for Roach, and then 2 goes to Malia. I'm pretty sure he just queued Roach into Roach though, so I think it's just more of a deterrent than anything. Okay, moving along. So we have Dragoncraft. So I believe this one was Face Dragon, the only Face Dragon in the tournament. So let's see what's different about this list and what's changed since before. So he is running 3 copies of Call of Megalorca. So this is strong even in an aggro deck. So a 2/2 Rush is very, very strong. So for example, against Sword, when they play the Luminous Knight, you can just play Call of Megalorca and crash the 1/2, for instance. In order to flow, you obviously get another copy from your deck, and then 3 copies of Phylene, so one of the better 2-drop followers with Bane, of course. And then it gives you a bit of counterplay against other decks, so you can full clear their board, or you can make their plays a little bit more awkward with the cost addition effect. And then 3 copies of Field Owl, obviously strong Evo target, 3 copies of the Searing Fire Newts, so strong against 1-drops, which does a lot in this meta. And he's still running 3 copies of Little Dragon Nanny, so Intimidate in this meta is quite strong too, especially because we're not seeing as many copies of Apollo Heaven's Envoy, even though it is as strong as ever. But I think, there's better cards now, but in Face Dragon, it's still the card that gives you a huge amount of tempo, so not surprising to see 3 copies. And then he's running 3 copies of Marion Ravishing Dragon Newts. Of course, this card, if you have an existing board, you buff it, it's a lot of damage. And then we have 3 copies of Fledgling Dragon Slayer, so even without Evo, you can clear anything on the field. 3 copies of the new cards, so Season Merman. This is really going to give you an advantage against the aggressive mirror matches. So Aggro Abyss, Mirror Sword, all of that type of stuff. The mirror itself. You go super wide. It's not easy for your opponent to clear anything left over, and then you're also clearing their entire board. So this card, I do think it makes sense for this to be in this particular Face Dragon. And then 3 copies of Forte, of course, your best card, does a huge amount of damage on your face. Odin, obviously a strong card that, of course you're going to run in Face Dragon, right? I mean, it fits in your curve perfectly, and they Super Evo and do 7 damage to face, what's not to like? And then, of course, you have 2 copies of Warrior of the Deep, so no matter how many wards you have, boom, 6 damage to face. I like it. I like this list a lot. Honestly, I'm not sure how many are running this particular Marine package, but I think the Marine package makes a lot of sense, and apart from that, he's running the strongest Dragon cards within Face Dragon, so congratulations to him, the only Dragoncraft player to make top cut. And then we have Chairman. So Chairman is running to, I won't say off meta deck. So Ward Haven is a deck that is seeing play primarily because of Roach Forest. So every Roach Forest player, when they see this, they're like, crap, like, do I have to play this 50-50 where they queue Ward Haven? And so basically, if you play Ward Haven into Roach, you generally have a very favorable matchup, which is why people are bringing this in the lineup. So the lists have changed a bit, so it's more of a amulet focus now. So they're running obviously Serene Sanctuary, Divine Guard, so you don't have to use an Evo point to clear. 3 copies of Pact of the Beast Princess, gain control of the board. 2 copies of Darkhaven Grace, so lets you fill in your play point curve, and of course heals you. And then 3 copies of Charetta, so one of the best 2-drop wards in the game. 3 Bellringer, just withdraw. 3 copies of Grimnir, so this is a deck that Super Evos a lot, and the AoE damage does come in very handy against a large amount of decks. And then we have 3 copies of Holy Shield Maiden, so it does have Barrier and Ward, so it's not that easy to clear. 3 copies of Salapha, it's a card that you definitely need to draw every game on turn 5 in order to fight against aggression. 3 copies of Unholy Vessel, so this helps bridge you as well. So a lot of players will try to go wide in order to play around Wilbert, but instead of playing Wilbert, you just go Unholy Grail and they're like, yeah, damn. And then you play Wilbert the turn after when they can no longer go wide. And then 3 copies of Ether, so of course against Roach, this card is insane. I think if you Super Evo this twice against Roach, there's nothing they can do about it. And of course, John is the card that really seals the deal. So basically, if they are unable to clear your Ether, then you drop John, buff everything, and it's even harder for them to clear. So that is why John is in the deck. Also, obviously clears the entire board. And then we have Sacred Griffin. So this is another addition we've seen a lot of. Basically, once you have control of the board and you have like a Dark Haven Grace, you can basically play this, and then Dark Haven Grace buff it, and Super Evo, and it's 10 damage to face, right? So a lot of people don't expect this, and so it closes the game. And it's one of the things that Wardhaven is missing, to be honest, because Wardhaven is constantly in a position where they have a lot of guys in the field and you can't really clear them. But this basically capitalizes on that and lets you turn a good board game state into lethal. So that's why we're seeing that. And then for Ramp Dragon, so Chairman, my goodness. So one of the only people, I think the only person to top with Ramp Dragon. So let's have a look at this deck list. Okay, so 3 copies of Striking the Dragon Unit makes sense. You need this against aggro. It's good in the late game, does 4 damage to any follower. Phylene, so of course, you definitely run this in Ramp Dragon. The best 2-drop, it scales in the late game, can full clear the board. Dragon Sign, if you're not playing this, why are you playing Ramp Dragon? And then you have 3 copies of Golden Note Melody, so draw 2, heal 2. And of course, it's very good with Penny. Obviously, you play it after, and then you can halve the cost of all cards in your deck, and then you can draw 2 cards from your deck with this. So from that point onwards, you're playing heavily discounted cards. 2 copies of Polo, so this is just to fight against aggro, and Evo on this in the early game turns will clear everything. And then 3 copies of Liu Feng, it's a ramp card, so of course you must run this. And then 2 copies of Fledgling Dragon Slayer, so it's just a way to bridge turns where you want to clear their board without needing to commit an Evo. So 2 copies of this, 3 copies of Draconic Strike. People who aren't paying attention and play into this card, boom, you full clear the board and you reduce the cost of a card, for example, Fenny, or maybe anything really in your hand to easier to cast play point range, right? So if your opponent's not careful, it is a problem. And crazily enough, this guy's also running 3 copies of Calamity Breath. So it's an AoE 6 play point spell, 5 damage to all followers. So I think this deck would be extremely good against Midsword. I don't even know how Midsword can deal with this deck, to be honest. Like, if you go like Luminous, like your Luminous Mage, they go Draconic Strike. And if you go like bigger than that, they drop this. And then like even if you try to play around it, they can drop like, you know, Strike or Phylene. Like, it's actually kind of crazy. I think this is actually the mid-sword killer. And then once you get Fenny down, if they don't kill you with Albert right away, which they won't be able to usually, then you just heal back up with Neptune. Obviously, this is a massive stabilizer. Like, once you get this down, they won't be able to ODK on the next turn. And then after that, when your entire deck's halved, I mean, it's only a matter of time until you win. Twilight Dragon is like the killer of sword. They can't do anything against this card. I think this guy, if he ran a Pull of Sword today, he would have killed them, like, definitely. And then Wardhaven is like the Roach killer as well. So I think he would have had to flip a few times, like in terms of guessing what his opponent's going to play. But I don't think this lineup is bad at all, to be honest. I think it covers a lot of each other's weaknesses. And so he definitely never ran into a match where it's like, I definitely lose this match. And then finally, we have Dolph on Artifact Portal. I think this is the last archetype we haven't covered. So, of course, we're running 3 copies of Flight of the Icarus. So this card is basically your permanent draw card value. So once you put this on one of your 5 cost artifacts, you keep repeatedly copying and playing on the field. And it's Rush and Last Words draw card. So it's huge implications in the long matches. And then he's running 2 copies of Artifact Catapult. So this card, you play on turn 2 or you can play on turn 5. And basically you pay 3 or destroy and copy an artifact following your hand, which will hopefully have Flight of the Icarus. Or alternatively, Carnelia, giving it the Evolve effect, where an artifact following your hand has ward and can't be destroyed by abilities, which means that it doesn't die to Catapult's effect, and it doesn't die to Doomright Resonance if he runs it, so he runs 2 copies. So Artifact now has a much higher ability to kind of play their 5 costs over and over and over again, and they don't run out of hand size while they do it. And so this can be quite challenging for certain decks. I think Artifact Portal generally is favored against decks like Sword. I think it's not bad against aggro as well, depending on just how hard they pop off on you, but obviously you have access to AoE and you have access to healing as well, right? So if they don't high roll you, Artifact generally has quite an advantage, especially with 3 copies of Lovestruck Puppeteer. So this is a premier anti-aggro tool and board control tool in the early game. And so looking at his deck list, he's also running 2 copies of Cruella. So I think he didn't opt to run 3 because it does take up a Super Evo on occasion, and you probably don't want to curve this out repeatedly. Like, maybe a turn 6 or 7 Cruella, but I doubt you want to play this on turn 8 onwards, so that makes sense. And then also, the Super Evo effect, you only really want to use it once if, like on Cruella, maybe like once on Sylvia, or potentially like Orcus, right? So it does seem like his top end, it's literally all 2x, so I think he just doesn't want to tax the Super Evo point too much across too many followers. And then he runs 2 copies of Odin. So Odin, of course, very versatile card. Lets you push the lead if your opponent's behind. And of course, it's like your tech option against Roach as well. You can kill the amulet. So not surprised to see this here. And then 2 copies of Orcus, obviously still a very strong follower in its own right. So when you play this turn 8, you chunk them for 8 damage, and it makes them a lot more vulnerable to, for example, Odin, for example, Ralmir, for example, 10 cost artifact. And then finally, we have 2 copies of Ralmir. So, you copy all of your followers in hand and you give them +1/+1 of Super Evo. So this card, depending on the situation, sometimes the opponent just can't clear everything. And then that's where you can kind of finish them off with Odin or the Gunham. So yeah, that's basically Artifact Portal. So that is it for all of the deck lists. So you can check all of this out on the website. So I will put it into the description in the video. So just check it out on your own leisure. So next, we're going to move on to the drama aspect of the video. So for some of you, this is probably going to be the main reason why you're tuning in. So I think it's not any exaggeration to say that this is potentially one of the worst tournaments ever run in Shadowverse history. And I think to an extent that actually it's not that bad of a statement to have, right? Because I think that's a testament to the fact that previously the tournaments were relatively smoother. And I can attest to that. I think over the many years I've competed in Shadowverse Open, the admins have done, I mean, I've had my disagreements with them, but they've done a generally good job. And I think if we're being real, like this is a situation that is new to them, and I'm sure that they will learn upon it. And I doubt we'll have situations like this come up again. So here we do have a statement from the admin from the tournament on today. So from Jello, so he basically goes, due to the ongoing stability issues with StarGG platform and delays with preliminary number 1, we'll postpone preliminary number 2 to another date. Schedule will be announced at a later date, and there may be a rules and format change. Prelim 1 will continue as is, but we'll also consider a makeup tournament for prelim number 1. We're sorry to announce this so close to the start time, but our priority is ensuring a high quality tournament experience for all participants. Please stay tuned to this Discord server for all future announcements. So obviously it's good that they acknowledge that they made a bunch of mistakes and that they're going to look to compensate people with the makeup tournament potentially. So I think it's great that they're not like scapegoating or anything like that. One thing I'll note is that the StarGG platform is not what we previously used. So they previously used Battlefy, and so I think the lack of experience in the new platform was a contributing factor to the many issues they experience today. Having actually hosted a tournament with StarGG myself with over 100 players before, I can confirm that although the platform is very powerful and it can do a lot of different things, it's not that obvious how you can actually do them. And so if you make small mistakes, it can have a pretty lasting effect on the running of the tournament. And then in addition, they've gone from 200 player tournaments through to 1,000 player tournaments, right? And so it's kind of outside of the wheelhouse. I think they only had 3 admins, which is crazy. I think you can't have that much hubris, to be honest. You can't be like, oh yeah, 3 people wasn't enough, right? I think they definitely got a bit cocky there. I don't think they should have done that at all. Like, especially for your first tournament, I think you should be thinking about the worst case scenario, especially, new game, new platform, you have way more players, 5 times more than any tournament you've ever run in the past. So I think, when you have many weeks in advance, like they knew that there would be this many players, right? They even had to increase the cap. Originally, I think they were only going to run like a 500 player tournament, but they had weeks in order to prepare for this. And so I think it is a little unacceptable that they didn't have the contingency plans in place. But I think they'll learn from it, so at least they've got that going for them. Okay, so we're currently on a Reddit thread that kind of popped off earlier today. So the first Shadowverse Worlds Beyond tournament has been a complete disaster. So effectively what it says is that originally the tournament was meant to have 512 players, but they quickly increased it to 1,024 players after seeing unprecedented demand. So that will make sense. In addition, they had a waitlist, so essentially it was meant to be the people that signed up for the waitlist first were meant to get into the tournament on the day. Provided some people don't show up, which is always the case. However, they messed up, and so effectively the way it actually worked is that they made it so that based on the time you checked in, that's where you would be in terms of priority. And so for some reason, I think they toggled some settings where they had to manually do this, and so they kept trying to change it back and forth. And what ended up happening was they had a 2 to 3 hour tournament delay, which is insane. Like, I had friends that were participating in this tournament, and they woke up at like 2 a.m. for this, right? And so to wake up at 2 a.m. expecting to play a tournament, and then they have a 3 hour delay, and then they're like, oh, okay, you get to start the tournament now. It's already 5 a.m. And like this is not the time zone like you're used to playing, right? You were willing to go from like 2 a.m. through to like I don't know, like 11 a.m. or something like that, right? But then all of a sudden they're like, well, yeah, let's add 3 hours to that as well. Like it's kind of unacceptable, right? And especially for people that stayed up rather than went to sleep early and woke up early, like the people that stayed up would be dead by like the end of the tournament. And that does really impact tournament integrity, right? Like as in, obviously people who have less sleep are going to perform worse. And so basically when the tournament structure and delays are contributing to that, you've kind of messed up like, who's supposed to be advancing, even though it affects everyone equally, quote unquote. It doesn't actually because everyone's in different time zones, right? So that's the problem. In addition, apparently the communication was radio silent. And look, to be honest, I think this is not as large of an issue, right? Because as we know, like they had a lot of manual things they had to do in the back end. And from what I heard, there were 3 admins only working on it. And so apparently like one of the admins like basically was meant to wake up for the second qualifier that was like 8 hours later that day. And they woke up and obviously like, what's up guys? And it's like the fire like meme where like, everything is on fire and it's got like a pizza box, etc. And then that guy ended up getting roped in to help with pool 2 for the qualifier number 1. That's kind of funny, like in its own right. And then basically, I think the big issue here is not so much that it was radio silent. We know why that happened, but it's more like they should have had more staff available. And I think maybe if I were running the tournament, if I'm like, okay, it's been like half an hour since we started the tournament, how hard would it be really to put out an announcement that goes, hey guys, we're running into these delays. We expect it to take this much time. Wasn't expected for this to happen, but here's like the options, and we'll continue to update you as time goes by, right? And yeah, it does take up an extra few minutes in order for you to do that, but when you've got hundreds of people, especially people who woke up for this or have been staying up all night, I think it really does make a big difference. So that's something that they should definitely do moving forward. So in addition, what's not noted in this Reddit post is like, even in the tournament itself, it was really crazy. Like apparently it took them like 5 hours to do like 4 rounds, something like that. And also people had dropped from the tournament, right? And they weren't actually being dropped from the system. So what ended up happening was essentially that you had some people by the time like they reached round 5 or whatever, and they were 3-2 in score, and they hadn't played a single game. Like I kid you not, like these people checked in, went to sleep, woke up, and they were 3-2 because there were so many people that had like literally just gone to sleep or like tried to drop out, but the admins didn't drop them. And so yeah, I mean like already that's kind of a situation where like it's unfair to people, right? Because some people actually have to win 8 games in order to qualify, and some people literally got 3 or like 3 wins for free, and that definitely doesn't sound right to me. So yeah, that's one of the issues like as well that wasn't really talked about too much as well. And so we do have a funny kind of emblem. So you're meant to get this Forte emblem for participating in the tournament all 10 rounds. But now maybe they should change it to have kickoff number 1 Survivor. So I think what's very likely to happen moving forward is that, they might consider hiring more admins, because obviously a 1,000 player tournament is a lot harder to run than a 250 player tournament. I mean, obviously there's going to be a huge amount of inquiries. And, you can't run the same amount of admins, right? You can't really skimp on the costs. And whether that was like because of the Elephant, which is the tournament management company, or Side Games not wanting to front the money for that. But I think, after this, I think they do take community feedback quite seriously. It looks bad on everyone's branding if these types of situations happen. So I think I would definitely expect to see them commit more resources on the day to run the future tournaments. I highly doubt that this will happen again, but the fact that it even happened once is already kind of unacceptable. I do think that at the minimum, they should probably give the emblem to everyone that participated. I think it wouldn't be that difficult for them to give like, 10 packs to everyone as well. Granted, it doesn't really make up for the fact that, people got a lot of their time wasted, but at least, you're making an effort, right? And given how expensive this game is, like 10 packs won't be unnoticed by people, right? Like it's not the greatest, but you can accept the token, right? You can accept it as a gesture that they're sorry for the tournament's operation, and they obviously don't want to give out free packs that frequently, right? So yeah, I think that would be acceptable as well. One of the things I think is pretty likely to be seen is that they may move back to Battlefire's tournament platform. I don't think it's necessarily StarGG's fault that the tournament went like this. I think it's definitely user error. I do think that to a certain extent, if your UI is prone for people to make mistakes on, especially when we're considering These people have been running Shadowverse Open for years, so they have a lot of tournament organization experience, and even they're making mistakes. I think it might be worthwhile to look at the UI of your site and just to make it a little bit more user-friendly and harder to make mistakes like this. I think definitely not testing this beforehand was an issue as well for the SBO team. Like when you have a 1,000 player tournament and you only have 3 people like online in order to help, and then basically you have to manually input everything. I think that does lead to a pretty difficult experience for all parties involved. So I would expect better planning moving forward as well, better funding so you can actually afford those people. They may move back to Battle5 because that does seem to be an easier platform to use. I've used both myself, and I do have to admit that Battle5 is an easier platform to use. So I'm sure like StarGG won't really care about the tournament as such, but if they are watching, like that is something that they should probably learn, because you know, you had a major company like Side Games running tournaments on your platform, and if they move to another competitor, like I'm sure that's not good for you, right? So, and again, I don't think it's StarGG's fault, but I do think it's an opportunity for them to look at. Mainly from the perspective of like, you know, I run a website myself, like Shadowverse Master, and like, if I don't think the website is good, then why should I expect other people to use my website, right? So I think that's like a pretty big one for me. And I know that when I used StarGG, I had some issues as well, but I just brushed it off as, you know, me not being an experienced tournament organizer. But, you know, now that I'm seeing like these really experienced tournament organizers, I do have a few more doubts that, you know, originally I attributed to my own lack of understanding. Look, it's a bit sad because I do think, you know, 1,000 player tournament should have been a pretty major achievement for the Western Shadowverse scene. And I think all the people who managed to top today, you know, congratulations to them. And of course, their names will be immortalized in a certain way, of course. I mean, despite the fact that there were a few issues with, you know, the fact that you could basically pick up 3 wins, despite the fact that you could play 0 games. But obviously, it's not easy, regardless, in order to get 8 wins out of 10. I personally am not a huge fan of the BO1 format with 2 decks, but I think it's here to stay. I don't think it's changing. So if you like Shadowverse and you want to play competitively and you don't like the format, well, unfortunately, it's not going to change. So I think you just have to accept that it is what it is. So if you like the coverage of the top performing deck list and also the tournament drama, make sure to give us a like and subscribe, and we will see you guys next time.